I'm going to take just a quick moment here. Jean, we see that you are logged on. We wanted to make sure that your audio was working. Currently, we have everyone muted. So, Jean, I'm going to unmute you and just see to make sure your speaker and your mic and everything is working. So, Jean, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you okay. I have a blank screen, though. I can't see anything. Just download complete.
So you can hear us and we can hear you, but what does your screen say? I'm sorry.
Just download complete. The original screen.
Okay. Jennifer, do you have any ideas?
Is there anywhere that you can click, or is there anything that looks
no, nothing.
Click on? And did you call in on the phone, Jean, or you're
No, I didn't.
You're accessing it through your computer? Okay. Well, why don't
Are you seeing anything that says run the file?
No. It just says download complete. Your webinar should start in a few seconds.
You know, Jennifer, and sorry everyone, will take care of this, but Jennifer, I'm wondering if she logs back out. And
that's what I was going to suggest also.
Okay.
So, Jean, I would go ahead and close everything out and then log back in using the same link, and hopefully that'll prompt you back in, and you should be able to see the screen with the PowerPoint slides. Okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, well, Jennifer, why don't we go ahead and we'll keep moving along, and hopefully that'll get worked out. Just some final notes, as this is our last webinar. The PACTech conference is Wednesday, June 27th, or that's the date that we're having our session from 9:30 to 10:30, and that's when the 3 discipline-based PLCs, so this group, carpentry and auto tech will be coming together for a final session where we can meet in person, much like we did to kick things off. And each PLC will be reporting out and talking about what it covered during its webinars. So let me just, I know we've, I think, asked you this each time, but let me just get a sense as we get closer. Can you raise your hand if you are planning to attend the conference and attending this particular session? Okay, so I see Edith, Joanne, Mabel. Okay, great, thank you. All right, Jennifer, was there anything else you wanted to mention about the conference?
Just that we'll be asking if anyone is also interested in speaking to the group about the PLCs. So if you are, please just send us a note or follow up with us. We'll be helping to prepare the slides, but it's just a matter of talking and answering any questions that the attendees might have. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we can go ahead to the next slide.
Okay.
All right, so Dr. Walker and Lori, we can go ahead and get started with your presentation. It looks like Jean is trying to log back on. Jean, can you hear us at this point?
Yes, I couldn't actually log off. When I tried to log on again, it just said, you're already in a webinar. You can't join a second one.
Okay. I wonder if you just completely closed. Did you try just completely closing out of your internet browser?
I can do that.
Okay. Yeah, why don't we try that, and hopefully that'll do the trick. Thank you. Okay. Dr. Walker and Lori, at this point I'm going to turn it over to you so we can go ahead and get started, and I'll kind of monitor to see when Jean logs back on with us. So hopefully both of you can see the screen with your names and the title of your presentation there?
Correct, I can.
Okay, great. So if you want to go ahead and get started, and Jennifer will forward the slides as you tell her to.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Walker. I'm a professor in career and technical education at Temple University, and I direct Pennsylvania's Center for Professional Development for career and tech ed teachers in the eastern region of Pennsylvania. This morning, myself, Lori Sally, who is a regional resource person for our teacher certification program. That's actually kind of our own terminology for an adjunct faculty member. And Jean Przybylkowski, a faculty member here at Temple who works with career and tech ed teachers, will be joining me. And we have been asked to engage all of you in a conversation on teaching and learning. And the things that we can do to help students to become successful learners. So this is, I have to say, it's a bit awkward because one of the things I'll be talking to you about is visual stimuli and, taking advantage of it when we teach. And it's kind of one of the components that we'll be missing here this morning for me a little bit anyway. But so I want you to know that if you feel that at some point we need to simply stop what we're presenting or what we're saying to clarify some aspect, I've actually asked Jennifer to kind of jump in and to do that, but I'll also invite all of you to do that. The way we'd like to proceed this morning, if we can, is that I'll begin with some background information on teaching and learning. What we are coming to know as best practice in designing instruction and teaching to reach more students. And we'll follow that. That'll be fairly brief, and then we're going to follow that with some practical applications for you as cosmetology teachers. Lori Sally will be picking up with that component of the presentation. And then that will be followed with some more information specifically on the inquiry model that we've been using and introducing teachers to in eastern Pennsylvania. We had sent you an article to read before today's discussion on the 5 E's. It's a model of inquiry teaching, and we're going to deal with that at some point, but we won't begin with it. So at this point, if I can, I'd like to ask all of you a question, and that is, I'm just kind of wondering if any of you have been to a professional development activity recently or taken a course recently that has addressed new research on how students learn and remember, or how students best think, or what we know about the brain and learning and how we can use it in our teaching. Has anyone experienced something like that?
If you would please raise your hand if that applies to you. And I'll take a look. Let's see. Not seeing any hands raised, Dr. Walker.
Okay, so let me jump in and say that probably in the last 10 to 20 years, there has been a great deal of information that has become available to us on how we learn. Neuroscientists, cognitive scientists have actually learned some things that affirm things that we've done as teachers over the years, and they've actually found things that contradict the things that we've been doing and continue to use in our teaching that we probably shouldn't. So I'd like to give you an example of that. For example, in the area of study skills. I know that as a parent and as a teacher, I always felt that, boy, it was really important for me to make sure that my kids had study time, that, there was a certain time after supper or sometime during their day where they were to devote their attention to their schoolwork and how they studied. And, for me, it was often me saying to one of my daughters, Michelle, okay, it's time to go up to your bedroom. I want you to kind of study, or there's a quiet area in the den, you better study for that test that's coming up. Well, actually, the research on study skills today contradicts all of that. In fact, what the research is saying is that what we should probably do is to vary the environment, and that students that actually study material in different settings, not in just one setting, do better on their tests than students who kind of just go to one area. There's one piece of research where students were actually asked to study some material in a quiet area of a library, and that was followed with a second day of studying in the same room in the quiet area of the library, and those students were compared with students that were actually exposed to studying their material in two different environments. One environment was quiet, but the other environment had background noise. And the students that had actually the varied environments did twice as well on the tests that were used to measure achievement than the students who studied in quiet environments. So the cognitive scientists haven't figured out exactly why all that happens, but what they do know is that the brain somehow sorts out or mutes, if you will, that background information, or it associates the material with that information and enhances learning. The other thing on study skills that's new is that, of course, there was a lot of drill and practice. It was take a certain piece of information and use it and study it until you learn it. Well, you know, what the brain researchers are finding today is that we should be mixing content, that we don't have to necessarily study only a single skill, that we should mix it up, probably like the musicians do or the athletes do, where they're not just doing scales repetitively in music, or they're not practicing handoffs only, but they're practicing starts and running, they're practicing handoffs and running, they're practicing multiple skills as they go about developing their overall skills. So there's a lesson there for teachers in that we should be mixing up the content and having students kind of trying to figure out how the content changes as the assignments change and to make sense out of it. The brain seems to do a good deal of sorting out and helping us to learn that way. So again, if you're paying attention to the professional literature, there are some things that can be very informative to us as we design instruction. For example, there's a current piece of research out that kind of refutes the whole notion of students' learning style and teaching style. That the authors of the research are saying that there just isn't a lot of hard evidence that supports those kinds of notions. They're popular beliefs and we use them, we design our instruction with those things in mind, but there aren't always hard data to support those kinds of notions. So you're probably sitting there and saying, well, what do we know and what do we need to do and what can we do? So I think at this point what I'd like to do, if I can, is kind of turn to some of the things that we're trying to make sure all of our new teachers over here in the Eastern region are being exposed to as part of their teacher certification programs. And it's some very fundamental concepts on how we learn. For example, it might surprise you to learn that the brain, at least the researchers are finding out that our brains, and as human beings, we're not really good at thinking. What we're really good at, what our brain is really good at, is processing visual stimuli. If you could imagine, for example, like driving your car on a highway, you know, while you're driving down that highway, you're processing enormous amounts of information. You're looking at the scenery. You're looking at the cars in front of you. You're looking at taillights, whether they're on or they're off. You're looking at turn signals. You're looking at highway signs. And you're processing all this information instantaneously. You're also perhaps even finding time to think about, you know, what you're going to do after work tonight, after the drive home, or what you're going to have for supper. So the brain is primarily wired for visual kind of stimuli and also for behavioral stimuli. So most of what the cognitive scientists would say is the real estate of the brain is devoted to those kinds of activities, and it's really good at it. It does that very, very, very quickly. Now, on the other hand, if you were to think about thinking, that's a little bit harder for the brain to do. So I thought to illustrate that, I would give you a little problem and see how you do with it. So let's imagine, for the sake of this discussion, that you're in an empty room. All you have is a candle, some matches, and a box of tacks. And the goal for you is to have a lit candle about 5 feet off the ground. Okay? So again, you're in an empty room, you have a candle, you have some matches, and you have a box of tacks. And the goal is for you to have a lit candle about 5 feet off the ground. Now, let me say you've tried melting some of the wax on the bottom of the candle and sticking it to the wall, but that wasn't effective. So let me stop talking and just give you a chance to think about how you're going to solve that problem. How will you get the lit candle about 5 feet off the ground? And if you could just raise your hand when you have what you think is the answer. And I would ask if you've heard this problem before that you don't raise your hand, but maybe you can comment on it after we're finished.
So please raise your hand if you have a thought, or if you don't have audio today, go ahead and type into the question box your ideas on how you would solve this problem. While they're thinking, Dr. Walker, are there any slides that you'd like me to be showing at this point, or we'll get to that?
Yeah, I think probably right after this, the slide that we're going to be focused on is the diagram of the mind.
Sure. Okay.
So that'll be what comes next.
Okay. Okay, I'm taking a look. I don't see any hands raised at the moment, so we might have to just call on folks. Oh, here's perhaps a comment entered here. Okay, would you like me to read the comment that was entered, or the thought?
Will everyone hear it? Will everyone hear will everyone hear what you're reading, or will?
Yeah, yes, they will. Is that?
Well, why don't we wait till we get a couple more?
Okay. All right. So Andrea has given us her ideas. I'd like to have everyone either enter a response into the chat field or raise your hand. I'll give you just one more minute to do that. Okay, we have another response entered into the chat box from Wendy. So 2 responses so far. Okay. So it looks like we have 2 responses, Dr. Walker. I'm not sure.
Okay.
The others are still thinking. Would you like me to read those, to share those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, why don't?
Oh, okay. Actually, we had a, pardon? Okay, yep, we have the last couple. We did have a question. Does the candle have to be lit?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so why don't I go ahead. Let's see. We started out, one response was light the candle first, then tack the box to the wall and set the candle on the box. Another one, hold it with your hands 5 feet in the air. Another response, place the tacks on the wall and place the candle on it. Light the candle and then stand up holding the candle. And tack the bottom of the wick to the wall and light the other end. So that's and if you'd like to hear specifically from any of those folks, let us know.
Okay.
That's the summary of our responses.
Okay, so now can I respond back?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Thanks for those creative responses. Actually, I can't actually prove that any of them won't work for you, but the response that I was hoping to get, I think the first person actually was closest to it, and that is the way this problem is solved is that first you have to dump out the tacks from the box. You have to take a tack and then tack that box to the wall about 5 feet from the ground, and then you can light the candle and place it on that box as a platform. Okay? So I think the first response was close to it, and perhaps, again, it was my instructions or it was the way I presented it that kind of threw you off. But the point that I was trying to make was that that was a problem that's often used in psychology classes. And actually, don't feel bad, because it takes typically the average individual 20 minutes to solve it if they're going to solve it. And most people don't solve it. And so the point is that I want you to kind of be thinking that anything that you design for a student, anything in the form of a problem or a thinking activity, it's a slow process for the brain. It takes time for the brain to do it. It's effortful. I mean, what you have to do is you have to concentrate and try to figure it out. And then the result is often uncertain. You don't know if the answer that you get is going to actually work or solve the problem until you test it. So when you compare that to the brain's visual system that I was talking about earlier, when you think about how we process visual information and how the brain does it so effortlessly and how good we are at it, and generally, you know, our interpretations, if not identical, even they're similar. So the visual system is a very reliable system. The thinking system is not. So I just wanted you to kind of keep that in mind as we go forward this morning talking about the brain and the learning. So I guess, you know, you could be scratching your head as well this morning and kind of saying, well, wow, you know, we think we do a lot of thinking about our teaching, and we think we have our students doing a lot of thinking about what they're learning. If it's that hard, it's no wonder we're not making any progress. Well, the truth is that we rely, all of us as humans rely perhaps more on memory than we do on thinking to solve our problems. So once we learn something and it kind of becomes part of us, we then call up that information and use it time and time again to solve our problems. So we're not always thinking and we're not always kind of analyzing, but we're often using our memory and past information about something that we're asked. So what I've asked Jennifer to do is to show a diagram that I've prepared of the mind. It's just a very simple diagram, but what it can show you is basically how our minds work. Okay? So on the left-hand side there you have the environment. And the environment is full of the things that we see and we hear. It's the problems to be solved. It's the assignments that we give to students. So that's represented by the block on the left. On the right is what the cognitive psychologists call the working memory. And it holds all that stuff that you're thinking about and that you're aware of at any moment in time. You know, it's you know, like right now, somebody can be in a room where you're kind of gazing out the window and you're looking at the wind blowing a tree leaf or a limb, or you're watching rain. So that's your working memory at work. It's the site of awareness and thinking in the moment. And then down below you have your long-term memory, and that's the site of factual knowledge and procedural knowledge. That's that vast storehouse of where we store all our memory. So what I want you to know is that thinking occurs when we combine information from the environment with information in the long-term memory in new ways. And we do that in the working memory. So let me go back over that. Thinking occurs when you combine information from the environment and information from the long-term memory in new ways. And that combination happens in the working memory. So just think about the candle problem. You know, I threw you out a question, the problem, if you will, from the environment, and then you started to think about it. And you were probably trying to use things that you knew about, similar problems, information about how we could solve the problem. You were pulling that information from your long-term memory, but you were doing it in your working memory, trying to find a solution. Okay? So let me give you another quick example if I can. And you have to be on your honor here. You're not going to be able to use any pencils for this exercise, okay? In your mind, what I'd like you to do is times 7 times 18, and then raise your hand when you have the answer. 7 times 18. Okay, everybody got it?
1, 2 hands raised. Okay.
Okay. So, can we hear from somebody that what they did, how they solved that?
Sure. Andrea, you were the first hand raised. I'm going to try unmuting you. Good morning, Andrea.
Morning.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi, how are you? You said it was 18 times
7.
7. I think it was 136 is the answer.
Okay,
18 times 7. 8 and 7 is 56. Carry the 5s. Oh, an 8 and 5 are 13. 136. Yes.
Do you want to hear?
Did I do that wrong?
okay.
Do you want to hear from another?
Oh, it's 7. It's 7 and 7 and 5 is 120. 35. Oh, now I'm all screwed up. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Is there someone else?
Yep. Let's see. Kathy also has her hand raised. Kathy, I'll unmute you. Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning.
Kathy, what did you get? 7 times 18?
126.
126. Okay. And was there one more, Jennifer?
There was one response that was typed in. I think that individual doesn't have a microphone. Let me find that.
Okay.
Joanne entered 126.
Okay. Okay, so if I can speak again then.
Sure.
So the answer to that, 7 times 18, is 126. And probably, if there were 15 of us here in this conversation, you know, several of us probably did it one way. Some of us probably did it another way. But it could have looked something like this, if you can follow me. In our mind, we put 18 on the top, and underneath it we put a 7, and we drew our line mentally. And then we times 7 times 8 was 56. So we put the 6 down and we carried the 5. And then we said 7 times 1 is 7 and 5 is 12. The answer is 126. So some of you, probably did, well, you knew that 18 was comprised of 10s and 8s, so you could solve the problem another way. But the point I want to make is that just to solve that simple problem, when I threw out the question, what is 7 times 18, I provided you with a stimulus from the environment. And then you started to try to work on that problem in your working memory section of your mind. But as you did it, when you times 7 times 8 is 56, you knew that fact, that information, 7 times 8 is 56, that was in your long-term memory. And then you knew that if you put down the 6 and you carry the 5 and you times 7 times 1 and added the 5, you in your mind were following a set of procedures. So while you were doing this problem in your working memory, you were pulling facts and procedures from your long-term memory. And so you got the answer by thinking it through, but that's what your mind was doing. It had a stimulus. It prompted you to retrieve factual information and procedural knowledge from your long-term memory, and then you were able to use it to solve your problem in your working memory. Okay, now real quickly, again, without any pencil, what is in your head? Figure this out in your head. What is 27 times 187? Raise your hand as soon as you've got that.
No hands raised yet.
27 times 187.
We need some Jeopardy music or something in the background.
Okay. Okay. Let me say that it's unlikely that you're going to be able to solve that without some help, like without a pencil and without some paper. And the reason is because that problem overloaded your working memory. You know, that you couldn't even begin the process of thinking it through. You turned it off, and you mentally turned it off. It was just too complicated because we had taxed your working memory. So, okay, so let me go over a couple of points. First of all, we as humans, we like to think, but we only like to think if the problems aren't too hard or if they aren't too easy. And I'm sure as experienced teachers, you've learned this over time, that if your problems are too hard, they're going to frustrate your students, or if they're too easy, they bore your students. So what we have to do is design our thinking activities, our assignments, so that they're just right. So what the cognitive psychologists would say to us is that there are actually 4 things that we need to do to encourage learning, to enhance learning. We need to have a stimulus from the environment, number 1. We have to have facts in our long-term memory. We have to have 3, procedural knowledge in our long-term memory. And then 4, we have to have space in our working memory. So when you think about it, there are tremendous implications of just that basic set of concepts and principles for you as teachers. That we have to make sure that our assignments are designed just right, that they're not too hard, they're not too easy. And that we have to know, for example, what facts students have in their long-term memory so that we can design assignments that tap or connect to them. Consider, like where we are here in Temple University in Philadelphia, we have children going to elementary school that have never been beyond a block of where they live. That's been their life existence through 6 years of elementary school. Compare that to a student who might have been to Disney World. The student that's been to Disney World versus the students that's been only to their block in Philadelphia have a very different set of facts in their long-term memory which they can use to solve problems. And they have a very different set of procedures in their long-term memory that they can use to solve problems. So teachers, we all need to take that into consideration. When you're thinking about the 20 or 24 or 30 students that you have in your classes, you have to kind of look at them, certainly you look at them as young men and women, but you have to look at them as each having a brain that is comprised of different facts and different procedural knowledge. And for learning to be efficient so that all students are successful, what we have to figure out as educators is how to connect our new information that we're teaching them to what they already know. And so it's this constant process of designing instruction, if you will, by creating the right problems and assignments from the environment, and then, if you will, activating prior knowledge. How do we know what they know, and how do we connect what it is that we need to it? How do we design instruction so that we're not overloading working memory? And how are we doing this in a way that's enhancing thinking? So those are complicated things for teachers to work out. It's usually experimentation, it's trial and error, it's you trying to design your lessons so this happens. But the points that I wanted to make is that all of those youngsters that you're teaching come to us with a different set of facts, some with strong algebra, some with weak, some with strong chemistry and science skills, some with weak. And you have this challenge because a lot of this, of course, didn't happen for them in their second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh grade, eighth or ninth, and now here you are trying to make up for all of the inadequacies that came before you. So that I'm hopeful that by knowing some of this, by taking some of this and using it in your instruction, it can help you design instruction that will get your kids to think and to get them to think well. So if I could ask Jennifer that in addition to just this basic stuff about those 4 things that we can do to design instruction, Jennifer, if you could just kind of put up each of those other slides on the brain and learning, the things like active learning, varied feedback, variable inputs, accurate and direct feedback.
I'm sorry, Dr. Tucker. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is that on this PowerPoint, yes, or is that on the other? Okay.
The slides that preceded this.
Oh, okay. Let's start back.
Okay. And all of the participants will have copies of this, I'm assuming.
Correct. We will post it to our working website, right?
Yeah. So there are, these are other kinds of things that these cognitive psychologists and neuroscientists are learning that we need to be using and integrating into our instruction. The active learning, the variable inputs, the feedback, how we create an enriched environment. You can read those slides and the information on your own, but think about how you can do that for students. Now, I want to turn this to Lori Sally, but I want to set up Lori by saying that an observation that I'd like to make is that I believe, I've been in CTE for a long time. In fact, I'm getting ready to retire and to turn it over to all of you younger folks. But I will say this, that my observation would be is that in CTE, we rely, I think, almost too much on direct instruction, or direct instruction with modifications, where we integrate small group processes or cooperative learning strategies, and of course project-based assignments. But there is a heavy prescriptive, if you will, element to CTE. And I think that if we're going to get our students in the future to be good thinkers, to do well on tests, to actually solve problems, and be able to perform the kinds of things that the 21st century is expecting our students to do, then we have to think about other models. And so we sent you an inquiry model. And the inquiry model of instruction, we're not telling anyone to put all their eggs in one basket. We think it's really important for teachers to have a variety of ways to reach their students. But the inquiry model, the 5E model, is an example of a teaching model that really lends itself to the kinds of things that I've been trying to describe to you this morning. It talks about, it really lends itself to a teacher creating an enriched environment where the student-centered kind of activities put students in the role of explaining and describing and doing the discussing and the explaining of the concepts rather than the repeating of the concepts. They're kind of active learners. And to create that kind of environment, I'm going to kind of turn it now, if I would, to Lori, because she has some information on that 5E process, and so does Jean Krzyzbokowski, on how we're using it to actually get our teachers to develop a range of teaching strategies as opposed to just that direct model and the direct model with modifications. So as we make the transition to Lori, if there's any confusion that I need to go back over, Jennifer, or if somebody had a question that came in while I was speaking, I'd be glad to talk to you about it while we're making the transition.
Okay, thank you. Just a note on the time, it's approximately 10:15, and we did have a question, someone who had a question, but in the interest of time, I think we might want to continue and then try to follow up with any questions at the end if we're able to.
Okay.
So let's see, which slides would you all like me to show for this next segment?
Jennifer, I'm wondering if you have a listing of the 5 E's.
That's on the second file.
Okay, I'll pull that up.
It's a
Is it this?
that one there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I have to agree with Dr. Walker. Unfortunately, a lot of our instruction is direct teaching application. And I have been using some of this 5 E's, and I'm really enjoying it. And if you've read the article, there is an explanation of each one of these E's that I don't think we have time to go into right now. I wanted to share 3 examples that we can use in our cosmetology classrooms. But I do want to say that there's no doubt about it. This student-centered instruction involves some creative thinking on the part of the instructor, and it takes effort, it takes planning, it might take more supplies, and it takes good management, classroom management skills. And we have to work as the facilitator. And I can say that personally, even after 30 years of teaching, this is hard for me. It takes practice and patience. I like structure. I like being in control. And I am learning to step back and to facilitate, to guide the lesson, and to really watch that self-discovery take place. And we've all seen it happen in our classroom. Because of our lesson, the student really gets it, the light bulb turns on, and with this self-discovery comes recall, recognition, and more application of the material. So whether you're a new teacher, you have 10, 20, 30 years experience, I think we're all obligated not only to keep updated in our trade, but also to offer our students fun, creative, interesting lessons, to use some techniques like the 5 E's. And it might be a good idea to take these 5 E's and write them in a corner of your planning book and try to incorporate them more in your lessons. We have all used some of this self-discovery technique, and maybe we didn't realize that's what it was. I have seen it in our AvTech Association. I have seen it heard it through discussions with other teachers. So I'm going to try very quickly to go through 3 examples that you could try in this first phase of engagement. We can certainly teach the level system by telling the students, the level of hair coloring is how light or dark it is. We could show them the textbook, so show them some pictures in the textbook. We could use some color charts. But to engage the students more, we might ask them, how about you get in a straight line from the person with the darkest hair to the person with the lightest hair color. And this would take some discussion, some collaboration. Isn't my hair lighter than hers? Some laughter, some chatter. Give them enough time, and they will eventually create a straight line of dark hair to light hair. You might want to then bend that straight line into a circle, put yourself in the center as the facilitator with some cards from 1 to 10, and together as a group you can say, well, who has black hair and who has, level 6 light brown, and what's the difference between light brown and dark blonde? And they could really see this and get this visually by looking at each other's hair. And I think that would be a much more interesting visual activity for them to do rather than just looking at the book. And it would be more simpler probably the other way to say, let's look at the book, and here I'm telling you the level 1's black and level 10's blonde, and moving on. So I think sometimes we have to take the time, it takes time, effort, planning to do some of these types of things. And the second one, exploration, could involve some exploring or brainstorming. And we learned a really neat activity at one of our AppTech meetings. I believe it was in Carlisle. You certainly could ask your students to brainstorm some ideas, and you as the teacher write them on the whiteboard. You would probably get the same few students giving you ideas and the same few students not participating at all. But in this activity that we did with our AppTech Association, if some of you may recall, the teacher had us break into groups of 3s. And the first thing she did was, in each of our group of 3s, to decide who had the lightest hair. And I remember this because I had the lightest hair, and I thought, oh, great, I'm going to have to do all the work. But she made that person to designate who would be the recorder and who would be the presenter. And then she gave us a list of something to brainstorm. And within our group of 3, she asked the reporter to write all those ideas down. So you had everybody engaged. Every student was working. And then she started on one side of the room, and the presenter of that group had to list all their ideas. She asked the reporters from the other groups to check off those ideas that were duplicates. And then she went to the next group, and they presented their ideas that weren't earlier presented, and we went around the whole room. So you can see how in this brainstorming activity, every person was engaged, every person was involved, and we must have heard, I don't know, 80, 90 different ideas that were brainstormed that particular day. The last one that I'm trying to move quickly here, the last one is on explanation or sharing of ideas. And I wanted to use Kathy Estep from Franklin County. I think, Jennifer, you have that slide. She had sent in, when we were doing the NOCD review, she had sent in a lesson plan on electricity. And I don't know about you guys, but this has got to be the most boring chapter in our textbook. And yes, we do have to teach electricity because our students use so much of it. So I thought what I would try to do was to take, and I did test this in my classroom, that I would take her lesson plan and I would change it over into a more student-centered instruction. And the first thing that I had to do was introduce the lesson. And you can see that she has, students will brainstorm an activity, electricity ideas that they feel would be associated with cosmetology. So my students, I have 10th grade students, I have about 24 of them. They had just done a haircut, and they were blowing it dry. They were all blowing it dry, and I turned off the lights. And they turned off their blow dryers and turned around and looked at me, and I said, you know what, there was just a huge power outage, and we have no electricity. And this is really going to mess up our day, because what kind of equipment can't we work with? And they started to say the blow dryer, oh, we can't use the flat iron, we can't use the electric rollers, we can't use clippers, and they went even further, geez, can we use the bathroom? Do we have hot water? And we had this discussion about how this would really shut down our business. We wouldn't be able to make any money. I said, what do we know about electricity? And they pretty much agreed that they didn't know much at all about electricity, except for they plug it in and they hope that it works. And I talked to them about how maybe we better have a better understanding of electricity, some of its terminology, its safety measures, and more respect for electricity and how it works, since it was such a big part of our workday. So I told them that the next day we were going to go into the electricity chapter in the textbook, and we were going to look at some of these terms. But in the meantime, we couldn't turn the electricity on, and the client wanted to go home. They were really concerned about getting home, and they wanted to look presentable. And what kind of things could we do to their hair that we didn't have an electricity? So I gave them about 15, 20 minutes, and they had some time, and they really did a good job. They, you know, I can scrunch it, I can towel dry it, I can braid it, and they came up with some ideas. The next day when they came in, I took some flip chart paper, and I used the kind by Post-it, and I had 10 papers around the wall, on the wall in my theory room. And I also had some containers with markers on their desks. And I have long tables, and I have 2 to 3 students sitting at each table. And I gave them each table a index card with one of the terms, one of the terms listed on Kathy's lesson plan. And I told them that they're working in their small groups at their table. They were to, you know, look up this word in their textbook and define it, and they couldn't copy it from the book. They had to come up with their own explanation of the term. They could draw a picture if they'd like, and to use one of the flip chart pages. So they started by reading the textbook together, and they started writing a few things down. Some of them went up to the flip chart, and I acted as the facilitator, walking around the room, helping them with different terminology as was needed. I then had each small group go up to the flip chart paper and explain their word. And I also had them on the reverse side of their index card write a review question. So they explained their term, and then they used their review question, and we went around the room, and we had 10 groups that did this. The next day, I had them pick a different person to present from their small group, but they had to pick a different flip chart paper. So they were really explaining someone else's term that they explained the day before. And that evening they had a homework assignment, because I do use the Milady Theory workbooks. And the third day we reviewed their homework, we went over the safety measures, and the fourth day I gave them a test using the questions that they had made up as a group. So they did well on the test. I then reflected by asking them, how did this go? Did they like this lesson? They pretty much did. They liked working in small groups. They liked presenting material to each other. They liked using the flip chart, and they liked having an opportunity to make up their own test questions. So I think the bottom line here is I could use a direct teacher method. I could have stood in front of the class, used the lesson plan, went over the terminology, referred back to the textbook. Would it have been effective? It might have been. Was this way a little bit better? Was this way better? It was, yes, it was better for me. It wasn't boring. I took a lot of the responsibility, teaching responsibility, away from myself, and I had them do some of the teacher. There was a lot of interaction, and we all enjoyed it a whole lot more. So I think I would like to try more of these ideas myself, and I hope the rest of the group would, and I certainly think our website here is a good way of sharing those ideas. I tried to do that really fast. I hope it wasn't too fast.
No, that was good. Thank you. And yes, we probably have about 5 more minutes, so I'm not sure if there was anything else that you all wanted to cover, or we can open it up for questions. I know we got some questions in, you know, during the presentation. What would work best for you? Do you all want an additional 5 minutes to present, or would you rather us open it up for questions at this point?
If I could jump in, Jennifer, I apologize first of all for going overboard, I guess, on the beginning part here, because Jean is being squeezed out. But maybe we could revisit the topic again if the cosmetology teachers agree. I'd like to, if you don't mind, open it up, and then maybe if we could just make a concluding statement of 1 or 2 sentences or something like that.
Sure, and Jennifer and I, we can also stay on the line for like an additional 10 minutes, so any of our participants who don't have other obligations, you know, please feel free to stay on, and we'll keep the webinar running for an extra 10 minutes as well, so we can address any questions. So, okay, so we will go ahead and open things up. So if you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand or type them into the question box, and Jennifer and I will communicate those to Dr. Walker, Jean, and Lori.
Michelle, looks like Andrea has her hand raised. I'll go ahead and unmute you, Andrea. Go ahead, please, Andrea.
Real quickly, first, I think that was a great example from Lori to kind of connect the article to what we could be doing in the classroom. But my question was more in reference, I'll use the math example specifically, that when we were asked to, do the math problem in our head, and we all started doing that because we all have that basic foundation of the times tables, so we could start doing that simple math problem in our head. The problem that I'm coming into contact with regularly is that students are coming to me in the 10th grade and they don't have those basic math skills, and so it's hard for me to draw from their previous knowledge when they're coming to me without the basic, what's 5 times 6, without using a calculator. So how do we get them up to speed with that if the math teachers from the past 10 years of their instruction have not given them that foundation? And I just am using math as an example. Like, what kind of things can we do to get them up to speed so that we have some former knowledge to draw from?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't think I have a simple answer for you, because we all are dealing with handling all of those inadequacies that you described. What we have to do, I think, is if we can take the subject matter that we're teaching, however, and we can arrange it creatively and do the kinds of things that Lori was suggesting with our instruction, and get students engaged, what we can convince them that it would be worth their time to work extra hard to catch up. And unfortunately, it's going to fall on all of you who are now working and dealing with these students, because, as you all know, it's not likely that we're going to be able to go back and get a sending school necessarily to fill in the gaps. So it's going to take a lot of genuine, hard work. The students are going to have to know that it is going to be a tremendous amount of effort on their time, and we have to recognize that failing, the fact that they failed before, does not have to reflect what could happen in the future. And so that perhaps just by connecting math to cosmetology and showing them how, in fact, it can be applied and used to enhance their work in the field that they're now studying, they'll become motivated to get better at it. And then we have to start there and go forward. It's a great question. I mean, again, I wish I had a simple answer. I do have 3 or 4 things that we could do if you can get a student motivate, talking about the way to deal with that student, how to make sure, for example, that they know how to study on their own. If you were to provide some supplemental instruction on some of the concepts that they are weak in, some of the things I was talking about earlier about study skills, students don't know how to study. So it's often left to you to kind of teach them how to study. Students often don't know how to think. It's going to be left to you to teach them how to think. So, and on top of all of the good things that you're doing, teaching them your particular field, your occupational area, many of the students are without the wherewithal to make that pay off. They don't have the study skills. You have to help them get them. You have to actually teach them how to think. And that can be built into some of the things that Lori was describing and explaining to you, by putting the responsibility for learning on them. So again, I apologize for no straight answer, but just a lot of hard work on the behalf of the students.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andrea and Dr. Walker. For those of you who do need to log off, we do realize it's a little bit after 10:30, but as we mentioned, and if our panelists have the time, we can take maybe 1 or 2 more questions from the audience if you have any follow-up questions.
Something that maybe I can leave them with, Michelle and Andrea, Jennifer, is that often when you look at a lesson plan that we're using and you analyze it carefully, it comes across as simply a series of teacher presentations, as Lori was describing. you know, it might have practice activities, it might have demonstrations, but it often looks like just a series of mini presentations. And something that I would encourage all of the teachers to do is to really take their plan out and to analyze it for the thinking opportunities that are provided to the students, and to see if in fact they can just give some attention to the things that we've been talking about here today. You know, just to, how do I make assignments as a teacher that are at the right level of difficulty? Our challenge is that we want to design our lessons that are beyond our students' reach, but within their grasp. That's the conundrum. And so you have to look at your lessons for those thinking opportunities and how we're designing them and how we're engaging our students in them. I think doing some of that is going to move us much further in getting all of our students to be successful thinkers and better test takers than we now have.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Walker. And I'm not seeing at this point any additional questions coming in, but for those of you who are still logged on with us, as we have mentioned, we will be posting the PowerPoint to the SAS site. Also, the 5 E's article is posted there as well for you to reference if you haven't saved it yet. Feel free to share that with your colleagues. And with that, just given our time, I will go ahead and wrap things up and thank each of our 3 panelists, Dr. Walker, Jean, and Lori, for joining us today and sharing some great information and insight with our participants today. So thank you all so much for doing that. And for our PLC members, you will see on your screen just a quick little wrap-up, a reminder to post your response forms for this webinar by May 29th. And then, again, the resources and presentations will be posted to the SAS site shortly. Also, for those of you attending the conference in June, we will be in touch with you regarding possibly participating in that presentation. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and close. We will hang on for a couple of minutes if anyone needs to ask Jennifer or myself anything. Please feel free to do so. And we just want to thank you all. This PLC group, you all have been amazing. Your participation, both sending us resources and responding to our emails, and also your participation during the actual webinars really has been amazing, and we are very grateful for that. We think it helped make things run smoothly, and hopefully you all were able to learn from each other over the course of the year. So again, thank you so much for your participation, and hopefully we will be in touch and see some of you at future conferences. So thank you all so much. Take care.